mechanics of the battle map now.
Yeah.
It's Napoleon's Total War, it's about Napoleon on kieren, but it's also about Napoleon himself. How are generals going to be represented on the battle map, and what do they bring that's new?
The general system is probably one of the areas of the biggest change in Napoleon, where Napoleon almost goes back, in terms of history, to the era of the warrior king, the idea of the man at the front with his men. Napoleon got the loyalty of the military, because he fought from the front. In the latter stages of his career, yes, he was a bit more of a kind of a rearguard general, but certainly in the early stages, in his early wars and his early conquests, he was right at the front with the charges across key bridges. He stood with the artillery when it fired in its first barrage. All of these kind of things he did, and that's what got him the respect of the army and eventually the respect of France. And we encourage that with the use of generals by making sure that the generals have a much greater active role in battles. So they now have this kind of command aura around them, which essentially means that they have this kind of like a sphere, essentially, which gives a buff to all of the units in that area. The more capable the general, the more stars he's got, the wider that area and the more significant the buff. So he moves through the army, basically promoting stats in all of the units that he surrounds. In addition to that, he has two special abilities: the ability to rally units, so units that might break and flee, he can bring back to the battlefield, and the ability to inspire units. So he'll basically go to this unit, you fight double hard, fight double fast, reload twice as quick, aim twice as well, and I'm standing behind you while you do it. And that, if you imagine, you can stack those kind of abilities. So let's say you've got an elite infantry unit, maybe a French Revolutionary Guard, right? You've got the general standing behind them, so he's buffing them by his presence, by that sphere of influence that he's got. Then he rallies them, so he boosts their morale and says, right guys, you're already good, I want you to fight to the last. And then finally he inspires that unit and says, right, as well as all of these other things, you've got to fight double hard and double quick. Those guys, as good as they are and as elite as they are, will fight to the death for the general, and that can really swing the tide of a battle, but the general has to be present to do that, and in so doing he exposes himself to danger. So by moving to the front, he's volleyed cannon fire, artillery, the odd errant shot can take him out the saddle, you could get whatever you want to call it, he becomes a target. On the campaign map, the generals now appear as obviously leaders of armies as they have done previously, but figures like Napoleon and major historical figures, of course, like Wellington and others, also appear on the campaign map as actual generals, making them vulnerable to assassination, for example, before they ever appear in battle, and making them a greater draw for action when they're in battle. So protecting your generals, but at the same time using them aggressively, becomes a much greater note in Napoleon. And I think that's probably the most significant change on the battle side, is the use of generals and how they're pushed into the battle.
Like in previous Total Wars, is the general attached to a unit, or is
the general has his own unit? So he has his own guard, essentially. You've got the general and his kind of his private horse guard. So he'll be familiar to previous Total War games, but he will have a unit of himself and his own guard uniquely.
Because I'm just envisioning that if he has a 40-strong horse unit, that might prove difficult manoeuvring to various areas of the...
Yes and no. I mean, you'll find that the general's unit are obviously probably the most highly trained in the army, generally speaking. But equally, we've balanced the game so they're not, like, a charge from the general won't necessarily always break an enemy infantry line or something like that. So, chucking them in needlessly, they're not a super unit. They're a super unit in conjunction with other units, and when used properly with their powers and used with the other infantry and cavalry. But on their own, they're not like a hero that you could send in and have decimate the enemy line and then walk out unscathed. That's not the situation. It's certainly a foolhardy way to try and use them.
Okay, cool. What about rumors about destructible environments, or at least environments that are more destructible than in the future?
Yeah, we've got I mean, I don't want to overplay this, but we've got a very basic deformable terrain system in Napoleon now. So you'll find with the heavy poundage cannons, you can take huge chunks out of the ground and blow these great big craters in the soil. That slows the movement of units going across them. It also basically creates a morale deficit as they see the earth all getting torn up. It's permanent damage. You can score the earth with cannon fire and all the rest of it. Some of it's graphical, but it also has gameplay implications. So yeah, that does exist. It is like I say, it's at the very early stages, so it's kind of an early style system, but it's definitely an improvement.
Excellent. One of the draw cards of Napoleon Total War that has been talked about is the fact that it's going to be much more focused on graphically, the zooming in of actual individual units.
Yeah.
Could you just unpack how that's going to be developed?
Sure. The way that the engine works now, Warscape, which is our internal name for our engine, basically it has a much greater ability to create units in higher fidelity. So if you imagine, we've changed the way that units are rendered. It used to be that a whole unit was like a model in its own right, okay? And you had a whole number of different models, even in Empire, which were put into a unit, and then the renderer had to to render all of these models independently. Now they're a bit like, and for want of a better term, Ken dolls. So you take a model and you swap it out with the chest, you swap it out with the legs, you swap it out with the boots, you swap it out with cuffs and lapels, badges, medals, swords, packs, and all the rest of it, including faces and facial hair and hats, which allows us to, on the fly, create a huge number of different varieties and variations in the actual unit, visualizations themselves. Even at higher draw distances now, we're able to draw the units in much greater detail. So what you're getting is a greater variety amongst the units and a greater level of detail, even at a higher level of zoom. So at the highest level of the engine, that's kind of what it's capable of doing now. So you should be seeing a much greater variety in your troops on the battlefield.
Now, is there a unit editor that you can individually describe?
Yes, there is. The unit editor, at the moment, I think we were planning to bring it out actually with Napoleon right on the same day, but I think it's going to be released shortly afterwards now. It's going to be, basically, it's a unit editor which allows you to create your favourite regiments and things in the game. So that same process I've spoken about of how we create our own kind of, we know that the 101st had this hat, these lapels, and this following jacket type, and this sash, and all the rest of it. That allows us and our historians to put together the right kind of units. If you feel that you're missing a unit for your faction that you prefer, and you want to invent your own kind of thing, that's what the unit editor will allow you to do.
Have you made any new innovations to naval warfare? I know in the Napoleon era it wasn't quite as important, but
yeah.
Have there been any new
I think everybody took place in the Battle of Trafalgar would tell you it was pretty important. No, in real terms, it was our navy, in terms of Britain, it was our navy that stopped us being invaded by the Grande Armée. So naval battles are very, very important in Napoleon. Just because Napoleon, this is the great thing about Total War, just because Napoleon wasn't a great naval tactician doesn't mean in his shoes you can't be. So you can go ahead and be like, there's no reason you can't destroy the British fleet, not that it could be done, but in real terms, there's no reason you couldn't attempt that and potentially successfully do it and then invade London or something as a result. But in real terms, we've created slightly different kind of UI and handling for the boat. So even on the larger scale battles, like when you're talking about things like Trafalgar, that the boats handle a lot more kind of smoothly and stuff, and it's a bit easier to control. In addition, we've added the ability to repair ships during combat. So whilst you're fighting, you can actually draw a ship off the line, have the crew leave their positions, patch up all the holes in the hull, and then send it back into the fray. So, that creates another layer of strategy on top of the actual gameplay. So you can be like, right, I can use all my little ships like mosquitoes, kind of sending them out, having them pellet them, and then come back and repair them and send them back in again. Or I can have a giant dreadnought style where I kind of plow into them with these massive first rates and then bring those back, repair them, shielding them with smaller ships of the line in the interim, and then sending them back in again. So there's a huge number of ways that tactic manifests itself strategically. So the answer is yes, there have been changes made to the naval side. Of course, all the naval units are brand new as well to reflect all the new ships of the line of the era and all the new technological advances. In addition, there are a number of unique units in there as well with the ships, flagship units of certain admirals that you'll come across, including things like the Santissima Trinidad, which is an absolutely massive vessel historically. All of these kind of things appear and fade in and fade out. So it's an interesting period for naval warfare.
Does Horatio Nelson, okay?
Yes, yes he does.